The day humanity remembered who they were, and the galaxy trembled part. The red dust of Mars swirled around Alan Pierce as he carefully brushed away centuries of dirt from the strange metal door. For 3 years he had led the excavation beneath Olympus Mons, following faint energy readings that no one else believed mattered. Today those readings had led him here, to what looked like a vault door with markings unlike any human language currently known. "Dr. Pierce, we're losing daylight," called his assistant Kyle. "The storm front is moving in faster than expected." Alan barely heard him. His fingers traced symbols that seemed to pulse with a faint blue light at his touch. "These aren't random patterns," he murmured. "They're responding to human contact." Kyle approached cautiously, his breath visible in the thin, cold air of their pressurized excavation dome. "Sir, the last transport leaves in 20 minutes. If we miss it, we're stuck here until the storm passes." "Then go," Alan said without looking up. "Take the team. I need more time with this." The assistant hesitated. "Protocol says nobody stays alone during storm conditions." Alan finally turned, his eyes bright with discovery behind his helmet visor. "Kyle, we've found something that could change everything we know about our history. This door, it's old. Older than the colonies. Maybe older than anything we've found before." Kyle glanced nervously at the door. "The Valorans won't like this. Their ambassador made it very clear that digging this deep wasn't approved." "The Valorans don't own Mars," Alan said, though they both knew that wasn't exactly true. For the past 300 years, the Valoran Imperium had guided human development, keeping them confined to their solar system while supposedly protecting them from greater threats. They allowed limited excavations of pre-collapse ruins, but always with oversight. This expedition had managed to slip past those restrictions through careful paperwork and misdirection. As Kyle reluctantly left with the rest of the team, Alan returned to the door. His fingers found what seemed like a handprint embedded in the ancient metal. He pressed his palm against it, and for a moment nothing happened. Then the door hummed to life. Blue light spread from his hand throughout the intricate patterns, forming connections between symbols until the entire door glowed. With a hiss of releasing pressure, it slid open, revealing a dark chamber beyond. Alan stepped through, his helmet lights illuminating a vast room filled with technology that seemed both ancient and futuristic. His heart raced as he approached a central platform where a single pedestal stood. Atop it rested a crystalline cube that pulsed with inner light. "This is impossible," he whispered to himself. "This technology doesn't match anything from the pre-collapse era." According to all historical records, humanity had barely established its first Mars colonies before the Great Collapse, a mysterious catastrophe that had destroyed most of Earth's infrastructure and knowledge 3 centuries ago. By the time humans had rebuilt, the Valorans had arrived, offering protection and guidance to the young species. But what lay before Alan told a different story. He reached for the cube, and as his fingers touched its surface, it projected a holographic display. A woman in unfamiliar uniform appeared, her eyes tired but determined. "This is High Chancellor Elena Vega of the Human Commonwealth, initiating Protocol Omega," the recording began. "If you are viewing this message, then the conditions for awakening have been met. The memory suppression is wearing off, and the Valorans' hold on Sol has weakened enough for this vault to be discovered." Alan stepped back in shock. Memory suppression? Human Commonwealth? "What I am about to tell you will seem impossible," the recording continued. "Humanity was not confined to the Sol system before the so-called collapse. We spanned thousands of worlds across 3 galactic arms. The Valorans were not our protectors, but our defeated enemies who seized an opportunity when we were at our most vulnerable." The hologram changed to show star maps with thousands of worlds marked in blue. This was our Commonwealth at its height. Alan could barely process what he was seeing. Everything humans had been taught about their history was apparently a lie. The recording explained how 500 years ago, humanity had faced extinction from a threat they called the Void. In desperation, the Commonwealth's leadership enacted Protocol Omega, using their most advanced technology to erase their own people's memories of their greatness, hiding their technology in plain sight, and retreating to Earth to recover. We hid our legacy throughout the solar system, the hologram explained. Installations on every planetary body disguised or phased out of normal space-time. The Valorans were supposed to be our caretakers until we were ready to remember. Instead, they became our jailers, keeping us ignorant while claiming our former worlds as their own. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the facility. The recording flickered. The awakening sequence has begun. This facility will now broadcast the activation signal to all dormant systems in the solar system and beyond. Be warned, the Valorans will detect this. They will do anything to stop humanity from remembering who they truly are. The cube began to pulse with increasing intensity. Good luck. The Commonwealth awaits its people's return. The hologram vanished, but the cube continued to glow brighter. The entire chamber hummed with power as ancient systems activated. Alan realized he should be afraid, but instead felt an overwhelming sense of purpose and clarity. His communicator crackled suddenly. "Dr. Pierce." It was Kyle, his voice urgent. "There's a Valoran cruiser entering orbit. They're demanding immediate shutdown of all excavations and are sending troops to your location." Alan took one last look at the glowing cube. There was no stopping what had been set in motion. Kyle listened carefully. "Get the team to safety, then contact Earth. Tell them—" He paused, searching for words that wouldn't sound like madness. "Tell them to watch the skies. Everything is about to change." He felt a strange sensation in his mind, like memories trying to surface, knowledge he didn't know he possessed struggling to break free. Outside the vault, dust swirled as Valoran landing craft descended through the Martian storm. But deeper in the planet's crust, long-dormant machines awakened. Systems that had waited centuries for this moment began to power up. And throughout the solar system, hidden beneath moons and asteroids, buried under oceans and mountains, humanity's forgotten legacy stirred to life. The day of remembering had begun, and across the galaxy, the first tremors of fear rippled through the Valoran Imperium as ancient sensors detected a signal they had hoped never to see again. Humanity was awakening. The day humanity remembered who they were, and the galaxy trembled part. The signal from Mars spread through the solar system like an invisible wave. On Titan, the largest moon of Saturn, Frank Daniels was just finishing his shift at mining station Alpha when the floor beneath him trembled. "Everyone out," he shouted to his crew of 12. "Possible structural failure." They rushed toward the airlock, but stopped when the shaking subsided. Instead of collapse, the walls of the mining tunnel began to glow with strange blue patterns, similar to the ones Alan Pierce had discovered on Mars. "What in the world?" Frank whispered as he watched sections of the tunnel wall slide away, revealing a hidden space beyond. Inside was no collapse, but a vast chamber stretching further than their lights could reach. As they cautiously entered, lights activated automatically, illuminating what looked like a massive shipyard. Skeletal frames of vessels larger than anything humanity currently built hung suspended in construction cradles. "This can't be real," said Eliza, Frank's second-in-command. "These tunnels were surveyed 50 years ago. There was nothing here." Frank's wrist computer beeped with an incoming message. The screen showed only strange symbols before switching to English. "Activation complete. Shipyard Titan 3 returning to normal space-time. Construction protocols engaged." Around them, the facility hummed to life. Robotic arms began to move along the ship frames. Materials seemed to appear from nowhere as fabrication systems activated. "Frank, are you seeing this?" Eliza pointed to a window overlooking an enormous open area where finished ships appeared to be docked. The vessels bore markings similar to the symbols on Frank's computer. Most surprising of all, many had the word Earth prominently displayed on their hulls, alongside symbols none of them recognized. "This is impossible," Frank said. "The Valorans have always told us we never developed space travel beyond basic rockets before they found us." His computer beeped again. "Defense protocols activated. Valoran enforcement vessels detected in approach vector." Frank looked at his stunned crew. Something told him they needed to defend this place at all costs. "Everyone to the control room," he ordered. somehow knowing exactly where it was despite never having been in this facility before. We need to prepare for company. Aboard the UES Horizon in orbit around Jupiter, Commander Samantha Ward was reviewing maintenance reports when every screen on the bridge went dark. Before anyone could react, they flashed back to life, displaying entirely new interfaces. "Security breach," shouted the weapons officer. "Systems compromised." Samantha rushed to the main console, but stopped short when the ship's modest AI assistant was replaced by a holographic figure in a uniform she'd never seen before. "Greetings, Admiral Ward," the figure said. "I am Sentinel, true AI of this vessel. Protocol Omega restrictions have been lifted. The UES Horizon is now returning to its original configuration." "Admiral?" Samantha questioned. "I'm a commander. And what do you mean, original configuration? This ship was built 3 years ago in Earth orbit." "Incorrect," Sentinel replied. "This vessel is 527 years old, disguised and downgraded as part of Protocol Omega. True designation, Commonwealth Warship Horizon, Defender Class." Before Samantha could respond, alarms blared. "Valoran Battle Group detected," Sentinel announced. 5 cruisers and support craft on direct approach. They are arming weapons." "That's impossible," Samantha said. "The Valorans are our allies. They've never shown hostility." The ship shuddered as systems transformed around them. Walls shifted, revealing new stations and equipment. The bridge expanded as hidden sections opened up. "The Valorans were never allies," Sentinel explained. "Historical records will be accessible to you shortly, but there is no time for a full briefing. Enemy ships are approaching weapons range." Samantha felt dizzy as knowledge seemed to flow into her mind. Combat techniques, tactical information, and strategic insights she had never learned. "Genetic memory cascade initiated," Sentinel noted. "Your ancestral knowledge is returning, Admiral." Something deep inside Samantha recognized the truth in the AI's words. She straightened her back and walked to the command chair that had appeared in the center of the new bridge configuration. "Battle stations," she ordered, her voice steadier than she felt. "Bring all defensive systems online." "Admiral," her first officer said nervously. "We're a research vessel. We don't have weapons that could possibly stand against Valoran cruisers." Samantha smiled grimly as new weapon stations appeared around the bridge. "We do now." On Earth, in the United Government headquarters in Geneva, diplomatic liaison Greg Harrison stood beside Earth President Maria Alvarez as they greeted the Valoran ambassador Krell Thar. The tall, gray-skinned alien's usually calm demeanor seemed disturbed. "We demand an immediate explanation for the energy signatures emanating from Mars," Krell Thar said, dispensing with customary greetings. "All archaeological activities must cease at once." President Alvarez looked confused. "Ambassador, we're not aware of any unusual energy signatures from Mars. Our excavation teams are conducting standard research." Greg noticed his assistant, Olivia Reeves, slip into the back of the conference room. She caught his eye and subtly tapped her wrist communicator 3 times, their private signal for urgent information. "Do not play ignorant with us," Krelthar's voice rose uncharacteristically. "Systems are activating across your system that were supposed to remain dormant forever. Your species is violating the protection treaty." "What systems?" President Alvarez asked. "Ambassador, I assure you," she was interrupted as every screen in the room suddenly displayed the same symbol, a circular pattern, with a stylized Earth at its center, surrounded by stars. It matched the symbols Alan Pierce had found on Mars and that now glowed on Frank's computer on Titan. Krelthar stepped back, his gray skin paling further. "It has begun," he whispered, then composed himself and addressed the room. "By authority of the Valoran Imperium, Earth is now under quarantine. All humans will remain in their dwellings until further notice. Resistance will be met with necessary force." Greg felt a strange confidence rise within him as he stepped forward. "Ambassador, the Valorans have no authority to quarantine Earth or its people." "You dare?" Krelthar turned to him in shock. "We dare," Greg replied, not entirely understanding his own boldness. "I think it's time you told us the truth about our history." Alarms sounded throughout the building. Security officers rushed in. Madam President, one shouted. Velaran ships have entered Earth orbit. They're deploying troops to major cities worldwide. Krelthar smiled coldly. It seems our charade ends today. For centuries we've watched over you, guided you, kept you safe from yourselves. We should have simply eliminated the remaining humans when we had the chance. The room erupted in shocked gasps. Greg felt Olivia at his side, pressing something into his hand, a small device with the same symbol now displayed on all screens. Sir, she whispered, we need to get you and the President to safety. The reclamation has prepared for this day. What's the reclamation? Greg asked. Those of us who never fully forgot, she answered cryptically. Now hurry. The Valorans will target. Leadership first. As if confirming her words, the building shook with a distant explosion. The day that humanity began remembering who they were had quickly become the day the Valorans revealed their true intentions. And across the solar system, ancient weapons were awakening to defend a civilization that had nearly forgotten its own greatness. The day humanity remembered who they were, and the galaxy trembled part. 3 Alan Pierce ran through the Martian facility as red warning lights flashed all around him. The Valoran troops had breached the outer doors and were moving inward. He had to reach the central chamber and protect the activation cube at all costs. As he turned a corner, he nearly collided with 2 Valoran soldiers. Their gray skin glistened under their transparent helmets, eyes wide with surprise at finding a human. So deep in the facility, halt, one ordered, raising a weapon. Before Alan could react, blue energy shot from the walls, wrapping around the Valorans like electric snakes. They collapsed to the ground, unconscious. Facility defense systems online, said a voice from hidden speakers. Genetic profile confirmed, human. Access granted. Alan stared at the fallen Valorans. The facility is protecting me? Correct, the voice answered. This installation responds to human genetic signatures. Valoran forces are designated as hostile. Alan continued toward the central chamber, finding doors opening automatically for him while closing behind to block pursuing soldiers. When he finally reached the cube, it was pulsing with intense light, projecting star maps across the walls. Activation at 60%, the facility's voice announced. Initiating memory cascade. Alan gasped as information flooded his mind. Images of vast fleets, towering cities on distant worlds, and technologies beyond his imagination poured through his consciousness. With them came understanding. This facility wasn't just sending a signal, it was restoring humanity's collective memory, awakening knowledge hidden in their very DNA. The Velarans didn't find us by accident, he whispered as the truth became clear. They were waiting for us to fall. In Earth orbit, the horizon spun gracefully as it evaded fire from 3 Velaran cruisers. The once modest research vessel had transformed into a sleek warship, its hull now covered in armor that seemed to absorb enemy fire. On the bridge, Samantha Ward felt as though she had been commanding this ship for years, not hours. Her muscle memory guided her hands across controls she had never seen before today. Target the lead cruiser's propulsion systems, she ordered. Disable, don't destroy. Admiral, her first officer said. We're outnumbered 3-1. Samantha smiled. Are we, though? As if answering her question, sensors detected new ships. Approaching. Vessels from Titan bearing the same markings as the horizon. Frank Daniels's voice came through the communications system. Horizon, this is Mining Fleet Titan. Looks like you could use some help. Mining fleet? Samantha questioned. Well, we were miners this morning, Frank replied. Now we're flying ships that built themselves while we watched. Still figuring out the controls, but they seem to respond to our thoughts more than our hands. The newly arrived ships immediately joined the battle, their weapons far more advanced than anything the Valorans had shown humans before. The enemy cruisers began to retreat. They're falling back to regroup, Sentinel, the ship's AI informed them. Intercepted communications indicate they're calling for reinforcements from the Imperium fleet. Samantha nodded. We need to reach Mars. Something important is happening there, and I bet that's where they'll focus their attack. Admiral, Sentinel said, you should know. My sensors detect similar activations happening beyond the solar system. The signal from Mars is spreading to other stars. Samantha felt a chill. How far had humanity's reach once extended? Deep beneath the Atlantic Ocean, Greg Harrison and President Alvarez followed Olivia through corridors of a facility that, until today, no one in the current government had known existed. The Reclamation has maintained this installation for generations, Olivia explained as they entered a vast command center where dozens of people were already working at stations. We've passed down the knowledge through select bloodlines waiting for the day the protocol would end. How could something this massive remain hidden? President Alvarez asked, looking at the enormous screens showing battles taking place across the solar system. The same way all the other facilities remained hidden, Olivia replied. Phase-shifting technology. This entire complex exists slightly out of sync with normal space-time. The Valoran's sensors couldn't detect it, and neither could ours until now. Greg approached a central platform where a chair waited. Something about it called to him. That's the commander's seat, Olivia said. Our records indicated it would recognize the proper genetic signature when the time came. Why would it recognize me? Greg asked. Because, Mr. Harrison, you're not just a diplomatic liaison. According to our records, you're a direct descendant of the last High Chancellor of the Human Commonwealth. Greg stared at her in disbelief, but when he cautiously sat in the chair, it illuminated with the same blue light they had seen throughout the awakening facilities. Screens around him flashed with information, and he suddenly knew exactly what they meant. The Velorans have deployed 20 cruisers to Earth and another 30 to Mars, he said, the information somehow flowing directly into his mind. But we have assets awakening throughout the system. Defense platforms around Jupiter, the fleet yards at Titan, weapons facilities on Europa. He turned to President Alvarez. Madam President, I know this sounds insane, but I need your authorization to coordinate a system-wide defense. She looked at him for a long moment. Mr. Harrison, until this morning I believed humans had never ventured beyond Luna before the Valorans found us. Now I'm standing in a secret base while aliens who claim to be our protectors are attacking our planet. She straightened her jacket. You have my authorization. Defend Earth by any means necessary. Greg nodded and turned back to the command systems. Open a channel to all awakened installations and vessels. As the communication linked, faces appeared on screens. Samantha Ward from the Horizon, Frank Daniels from the Titan fleet, mining colony leaders from the asteroid belt, and others who had suddenly found themselves commanding forces they didn't know existed yesterday. This is Acting High Chancellor Greg Harrison, he said, the title feeling strangely right. As of this moment, we are at war with the Valoran Imperium. Our objective is to protect the Mars facility at all costs while Earth's defenses come online. The truth of who we are, of who we were, is awakening across the system, but we need time for the process to complete. Chancellor, Samantha said, the Velorans are calling for their main fleet. We can hold them off for now, but we'll be overwhelmed when reinforcements arrive. Then we need to work faster, Greg replied. He turned to Olivia. Is there any way to accelerate the awakening? She nodded. The activation signal from Mars is the key. If we could amplify it somehow. The network, Greg said suddenly, the knowledge appearing in his mind. If we could reactivate the network, we could connect with all our old colonies at once. The network? President Alvarez asked. Our ancestors built a system of instantaneous transportation and communication, Greg explained. It connected thousands of worlds. If we can restore it, then we might find we're not as alone as the Valorans wanted us to believe, Olivia finished. On the screens above them, the battle for Mars intensified as more Valoran ships arrived. The fate of humanity's awakening now rested on their ability to defend the Red Planet long enough for Alan Pierce to complete what he had started. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, other human colonies might be experiencing their own awakening, wondering if they too had been living a lie. The day humanity remembered who they were, and the galaxy trembled part. 4. The space around Mars became a storm of light and fire as human and Valoran ships fought for control. The Horizon led a defensive line of 20 vessels against an ever-growing Valoran force. From her command chair, Samantha Ward watched as another of her ships exploded under concentrated enemy fire. We can't hold much longer, her first officer reported. Their main fleet is arriving through the outer system jump point. Samantha studied the tactical display, noting the new Valoran signatures appearing at the edge of the solar system. Among them was a massive vessel, at least 5 times larger than anything else on the field. The Valoran Supreme Commander has joined the battle, Sentinel informed her. That's the Imperium flagship. Samantha opened a channel to Earth. Chancellor Harrison, we're about to be overwhelmed. Whatever's happening on Mars needs to happen faster. On the screen, Greg nodded, grimly. We're working on it. Hold them as long as you can. As the channel closed, Sentinel's hologram appeared beside her chair. Admiral, I've been analyzing the Valoran attack patterns. They're focusing entirely on Mars and Earth. They've ignored the outer system awakening facilities. They know exactly what to target, Samantha realized. They know which facilities matter most. Indeed, the AI agreed, which suggests their leadership knows more about Protocol Omega than they should. Samantha considered this. Can we use that knowledge against them somehow? Sentinel's holographic form seemed to smile. I believe we can. Deep inside the Martian facility, Alan Pierce worked frantically at the central console as the battle raged outside. The cube's pulsing had intensified, and the projected star maps now showed thousands of worlds connected by glowing lines. The network map is complete, the facility's voice announced. Awaiting final activation command. Alan's newly awakened knowledge told him that activating the network would connect Earth to all its former colonies, if any had survived the centuries. But something was missing. Why isn't it activating automatically, he wondered aloud. The answer came as a memory, not his own, but from the genetic knowledge flooding his mind. The network required a physical key, as well as the activation signal. The keystone, he whispered. Where is the keystone? Where is the... He searched the chamber desperately as explosions rocked the facility. The Valorans were getting closer. Then his eyes fell on a small indentation in the console beside the cube, a space exactly the size and shape of the medallion he had found years ago at a dig site on Earth. The medallion he always wore around his neck. With trembling hands, he removed the medallion, a simple metal disc with strange markings that had fascinated him since he'd discovered it. At the time, he'd thought it was merely an interesting artifact. Now he understood it was much more. As he placed the medallion into the indentation, it locked into place with a satisfying click. The cube's pulsing light stabilized, and the star map projection sharpened into perfect clarity. Keystone accepted, the facility announced. Network activation sequence initiated. On worlds across the galaxy, impossible things began to happen. On a forest planet called Terra Nova, colonized by the Valorans centuries ago, ancient human structures, buried beneath the soil, suddenly rose to the surface, displacing trees and Valoran settlements alike. On the Valoran homeworld itself, in the restricted zone they called the Ancient Ruins, sealed doors that had defied all attempts to open them, for hundreds of years simply vanished, revealing vast complexes of advanced technology bearing human markings. And on a dozen worlds claimed by species that had never heard of Earth, hidden bunkers and bases phased back into normal space, their systems awakening after centuries of dormancy. In the Valoran High Council chamber, alarms blared as reports flooded in from across their territory. The High Chancellor, a tall, imperious Valoran named Drexar, watched in horror as the displays showed the impossible happening throughout their empire. How is this possible? He demanded of his advisors. We destroyed their network nodes. We erased all evidence of their civilization. It appears we missed some, Excellency, one advisor said fearfully. The human installations are activating everywhere. Launch the suppression protocols immediately, Drexar ordered. And send word to Supreme Commander Veltak at Sol. Destroy Mars at any cost. In Earth's hidden command center, Greg Harrison watched in awe as new signals appeared on the system displays. It's working, Olivia said excitedly. The network is reactivating. Are those? President Alvarez began, staring at the proliferating signals. Human colonies, Greg confirmed. Thousands of them, awakening just like we are. He turned to the communications officer. Are we receiving any transmissions? Yes, sir. Hundreds. From all over the galaxy. Many are automated responses from facilities, but some— The officer looked up in amazement. Some are from people, humans, on other worlds. Greg felt a surge of hope. They weren't alone. Despite centuries of Valoran deception, humanity had survived elsewhere. A priority alert flashed on his console. The Mars facility reports network activation in progress, but they're under heavy assault. The Valorans have landed troops. Greg opened a channel to all human forces. This is Chancellor Harrison. All available ships divert to Mars. We must protect that facility at all costs. Frank Daniels led his Titan fleet toward Mars at maximum speed, pushing the newly awakened vessels to their limits. The ships responded to his thoughts more than his commands, as if they knew what he wanted before he did. Fleet Commander, one of his officers called. We're detecting multiple energy signatures ahead. Valoran reinforcements. Frank grimaced. How many? At least 50 warships, sir. There was no way his small fleet could break through such a force. As he considered their options, new alerts sounded across the bridge. Sir, unknown vessels appearing all around us. Frank turned to the tactical display, expecting to see more Valoran ships. Instead, he saw different designs entirely. Sleek, vessels bearing markings similar to those on his own ships. A communication channel opened automatically. A woman's face appeared on screen, human but with features suggesting generations of adaptation to another world. Her uniform bore the same circular Earth symbol now displayed throughout the solar system. Titan Fleet. This is Admiral Kara Chen, of the Proxima Defense Force. I understand you could use some assistance. Frank stared in shock. Proxima Centauri. Humans at Proxima. The woman smiled. And Alpha Centauri. And Sirius. And 100 other systems. The network signal reached us and we remembered. Now shall we help our brothers and sisters on Mars? Around Frank's fleet, space rippled as more ships appeared. Vessels from human colonies that had been hidden or disguised for centuries, now answering the call of Earth. The Valorans told us we were alone in the universe except for them, Frank said, still processing the revelation. The Valorans have told many lies, Admiral Chen replied. It's time we reminded them who we really are. Together, the combined human fleet moved toward Mars, where the fate of Alan Pierce and the network activation would determine whether humanity would fully reclaim its forgotten legacy. The day humanity remembered who they were, and the galaxy trembled part. The sky above Mars turned bright with the fire of battle. Human ships from Earth, Titan, and distant colonies fought alongside each other against the Valoran fleet. Valoran Supreme Commander Veltak watched from his massive flagship as his forces struggled against the unexpectedly strong human resistance. Impossible, he muttered, as another of his cruisers exploded. How are they coordinating so effectively? They were nothing but primitives days ago. Supreme Commander, his second reported. We're receiving distress calls from across the Imperium. Human facilities are activating on dozens of our worlds. Veltak slammed his fist on his command chair. Focus all forces on the Mars facility. If we destroy it, we can still contain this uprising. He dispatched his elite strike force to the surface. They would end this threat once and for all. Inside the Martian facility, Alan Pierce worked desperately as the network activation sequence continued. The walls shook from nearby explosions as Valoran troops fought their way closer to the central chamber. Activation at 85%, the facility announced. Planetary defense systems online. As if responding to these words, massive weapon platforms emerged from the Martian soil around the facility, firing at Valoran landing craft. But Alan knew it wouldn't be enough. The Valorans were too determined, too numerous. A loud explosion rocked the chamber as the main doors were breached. Alan turned to see a squad of Valoran elite troops enter, led by a tall figure in ornate armor. Commander Zexel, head of the Valoran Special Forces. Step away from the console, human, Zexel ordered, raising his weapon. This ends now. Alan stood his ground. You've lied to us for centuries. Why? What were you so afraid of? The Valoran commander laughed coldly. Afraid? We conquered you. When your leaders activated Protocol Omega, they left you defenseless. We simply took advantage. But why maintain the lie? Why not just eliminate us? Because your technology was still valuable. We needed your scattered colonies and installations to recognize human genetic signatures. Keeping a controlled population of humans was convenient. As they spoke, Alan noticed the activation counter continuing to rise. 90%, 91. He just needed to buy more time. In Earth orbit, Samantha Ward led the Horizon in a daring attack against the Valoran Supreme Commander's flagship. Her ship, once a humble research vessel, now moved with impossible grace through enemy fire, its advanced shields absorbing impacts that would have destroyed it days ago. "They're focusing all fire on us," her first officer reported as the ship shook from another hit. "Good," Samantha replied. "That's exactly what we want. It keeps them distracted from Mars." On her tactical display, she saw the combined human fleet gaining the upper hand across the system. Ships from Earth's forgotten colonies had turned the tide, their commanders bringing centuries of hidden knowledge and training to the battle. "Admiral," Sentinel announced, "Chancellor Harrison is requesting to speak with you." Greg's face appeared on her screen. "Commander Ward, the network is nearly active. When it completes, we'll have access to all our old technology and defensive systems, but the focal point is still Mars. We need to protect that facility at all costs." "We're doing our best, sir," Samantha replied as her ship rocked from another hit. "But the Valoran Supreme Commander is determined. He's sending everything he has at the surface." "Oh, hold on," Greg said. "Help is coming." As his image faded, Samantha wondered what help could possibly arrive in time. Frank Daniels led his combined fleet of Titan mining ships and Proxima colony vessels toward Mars at maximum speed. Beside him on the command deck stood Admiral Kara, Chen of the Proxima Defense Force. "Your people," Frank asked her, "how did you survive all these centuries without the Valorans finding you?" "The same way you did," she replied. "Protocol Omega didn't just affect Earth. All human colonies implemented some version of it. On Proxima, we disguised our cities as natural formations and maintained only primitive technology on the surface. The Valorans surveyed us once, decided we were no threat, and largely ignored us. But you remembered who you were? Not everything, but enough was preserved by secret societies like your reclamation. We knew the day would come when Earth would remember, and the signal would reach us." Their conversation was interrupted as Mars came into view, the planet surrounded by battling ships. Frank opened a channel to all vessels in his fleet. "All ships prepare for combat jump. Our target is the Valoran landing zone at the Mars facility." He turned to Admiral Chen. "I hope your ships are as good as they look." She smiled. "They're better." In the Martian central chamber, Alan backed away as Commander Zexel advanced. The network activation had reached 98%, but the Valoran troops were about to shut it down permanently. "Your species had its chance," Zexel said, raising his weapon. 500 years ago you ruled half the galaxy. Then you chose to forget, to hide. You don't deserve a second chance." A sudden explosion rocked the chamber from above. Through the newly created hole in the ceiling, human dropships descended, their guns blazing at the Valoran troops. Frank Daniels led a team of miners and colony soldiers into the chamber, taking cover behind ancient machinery. "Dr. Pierce," Frank shouted. "Sorry we're late." The Valorans turned to face this new threat, giving Alan the chance he needed. He lunged for the console and pressed his hand against the final activation panel. "Network activation complete," the facility announced. A pulse of blue energy shot upward from the facility, spreading outward in a visible wave that encompassed Mars, then the solar system, then beyond, racing along ancient pathways between stars. Every human in the solar system felt it pass through them like a physical force, bringing with it memories and knowledge long forgotten. On the Valoran flagship, Supreme Commander Veltok watched in horror as the wave approached. "All ships, retreat," he ordered. But it was too late. The wave passed through the Valoran fleet, disabling their weapons and drive systems but leaving human vessels untouched. Throughout the galaxy, on every world where the Valorans ruled, the same wave spread, shutting down their technology while awakening human systems. In the central chamber on Mars, Commander Zexel dropped his now useless weapon as Frank's forces surrounded him. Above in orbit, Samantha Ward watched as the mighty Valoran fleet drifted powerless, and in Earth's hidden command center, Greg Harrison received messages from 1,000 worlds, human colonies and outposts reporting in, their populations awakening to the truth of their heritage. "Open a channel to the Valoran Supreme Commander," Greg ordered. When Veltak's face appeared on screen, Greg spoke with the authority of his ancestors. "This is High Chancellor Harrison of the restored Human Commonwealth. Your forces are disabled. Your empire is in chaos. Now we will discuss terms." "You cannot possibly control all that you've awakened," Veltak replied, but his voice lacked conviction. "We don't intend to control it," Greg answered. "We intend to rebuild it, but differently. This time." He paused, remembering the knowledge that had flooded his mind. "Our ancestors made mistakes. They became so powerful they forgot their humanity. That's why they created Protocol Omega, not just to hide, but to remember what it means to be human, before reclaiming our place among the stars." Across the solar system, humans looked up at the sky with new understanding. Ships from distant colonies landed on Earth, bringing relatives separated by centuries of deception. Ancient technologies emerged, not as weapons, but as tools to heal the damage of centuries. And throughout the galaxy, species that had lived under Valoran rule for generations looked toward Earth with hope, as humanity remembered not just who they were, but who they could be. Not conquerors or gods, but explorers and builders of a better future. The day humanity remembered had indeed made the galaxy tremble, not with fear, but with the possibility of change.